As with all of our presentations at Royal Roads, it's important to acknowledge the beautiful lands that our university is located upon. Royal Roads University is located on the traditional lands of the Kusepsum and Lekwungen ancestors and families. It's with great gratitude that we live, learn, work, and play on these beautiful and expansive lands. This statement means that we at Royal Roads recognize the importance of Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples' relationships, and we continue to learn to understand the history, present, and future scope of Indigenous peoples. This may be a great time to give the chat box for a spin. So head to that black bar, open up your chat box, and let us know, where are you joining us from today? We've been lucky to have a pretty global audience throughout our open house week. So let us know, what time is it for you? It's just about lunchtime where I am. So while the chat box starts filling up, let's continue on with what we're here to talk about, the School of Humanitarian Studies. This slide is just a quick flash of all of the different programs that we offer within the School of Humanitarian Studies. Our presentation today, we're going to dive into these areas and learn a bit more about each of the programs. But before we do that, we want to know a bit more about all of you. So let's do that with a poll. I'm going to click Launch Poll now, and you should have a poll in front of you where, if we did this right, you can select all that apply. So, what interests you about humanitarian studies? Are you interested in how to approach full spectrum of conflict, from interpersonal to international? Are you interested in how to support communities at risk and increase their resilience? Perhaps how to build sustainable peace across the globe? Or how to solve complex social issues? Maybe how to create a more holistic approach to child and youth well-being. Now, this is quite a wordy poll, so let's give us a couple seconds while we get clicking around. Once we have just over half of our attendees today responding to the poll, I'll shut it down and we can look at it together. A nice treat about this poll, as it gives you an idea of all the different areas within our programs. So kind of a precursor to, or a bit of a peek rather, but what we're going to explore together today. So why don't we end this poll and I'll share the results. So we have interest across all of our programs. Most notably, we have folks interested in learning how to approach full spectrum of conflict, from interpersonal to international, how to solve complex issues, and then all of these other things as well. And this is awesome because we see all of these different areas show up in most all of our programs. So speaking of our programs, let's get started. And by that, let's meet some of the people who are going to tell us about the programs today. So starting with Dr. Jean Slick. Dr. Jean Slick is the program head and associate professor for our disaster and emergency management programs. We have Dr. Ken Christie, who is the program head and professor in the human security and peace building programs. We have Dr. Marnie Joel, an associate professor and program head for our conflict analysis and management programs. We have Dr. Michael Young, the director of the School of Humanitarian Studies and the program head for our graduate programs in justice studies. And we also have Dr. Kathleen Mannion, an associate professor and program head of our brand new graduate certificate in transforming child protection to well-being. Let's start chatting with these cool people, starting with Jean. So I will pass the microphone over to you.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. It's great to have you here, and nice to see people joining us from so many different places, both in Canada and around the world. So I teach in the Disaster and Emergency Management program here at Royal Roads, and thought I would start off just by talking about a topic of interest maybe to everyone who is here, and that is that in our program, we make the distinction between disasters and hazards. And the first thing that we do in terms of thinking about disasters, is to say that disasters are not natural. If you're interested in knowing more about that, I would ask that you could Google, or suggest you Google, known natural disasters, and you'll go to the No Natural Disaster Campaign site. So what do we mean by disasters not being natural? Well, first, we want to distinguish between a disaster and a hazard. And so hazards are the things that we often think of when we think about disasters. Hazards are things like a hurricane, an earthquake, a tornado, or even the pandemic that we're living with right now. So these natural phenomena, natural hazards, are quite different than what a disaster is. But culturally, we often refer to the disaster by the name of the hazards. We'll say, referring to Hurricane Katrina as the disaster. The hurricane's only part of it, though. The reason that hazards become disaster are much more complex than that. And disasters are really the product of a natural hazard in a particular place and a particular time, and they are a social phenomena. There's cultural dimensions to disasters. There are economic and political reasons why disasters occur. And so what we do in the disaster and emergency management program is do a deep dive into understanding what disasters really are and how they are manifest and come to be created. And we actually do say disasters are created in society. And then with that notion, we think then more broadly about what it is we can do to reduce disasters and reduce risk and reduce the impacts of disasters in society. And so it's not simply about building a dike, for example, to stop flooding. It's actually much broader than that. It might be about changing land use patterns, as an example. It's also about dealing with underlying vulnerabilities. And we see issues related to vulnerability even with the current COVID pandemic. We know that some populations are more at risk and some populations are more vulnerable than others. And so we're seeing that the impacts are not equal across society. And this is an example about how pre-existing social conditions can have an influence in terms of who is impacted by a disaster. So with that foundation, then we shift into then looking at the practice of disaster and emergency management. There's really sort of five functional areas of practice. We can think about prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery for disasters. And so our program draws on over 50 years now of social science research about what we know about hazards, disasters, and communities. And the challenge is that that depth of knowledge is not being put into practice on a regular basis. And so our goal is to help change that, to shift and change the orientation to how disasters are managed and experienced in the world, and to work towards reducing vulnerabilities that leave disproportionate impacts in society. So people who come to our programs come from different places. Some people come because they've got a relevant undergrad and they're really keen to move into disaster and emergency management. So any kind of social science undergrad program is usually very relevant. And similarly, we have people who come from professions. The traditional professions are first responder agencies. So police, fire, EMS. We have a large number of people who come from the military. We also have people come from the not-for-profit sector. We have people who work at the local government level, people who might work in healthcare and nursing. So it's a really broad field. And as we look at addressing the problem of disasters in society, it's not something that any one discipline or any one field of practice can do. It's something that we need to do collectively together. So we take that broad, holistic approach, systems perspective to looking at what disasters are in society, and use that to then frame what we think practice can and should be. So disaster and emergency management as a field of study has been around since the 1990s. And we are the first program in Canada to offer a graduate program in this area. As a field of practice, disaster and emergency management is now in that space of what we call professionalizing. And one of the things that professions have is an educational pathway that supports practice in that profession. And so the program that we offer is helping to contribute to and is supporting the advancement of disaster and emergency management as a profession. So folks who come out of our program, I always say to them that they are still on the front end of the professionalizing of this field as a new field of practice in society. So if we can move to the next slide, please. The list of sample topics that are offered here are really actually titles of courses. So this gives you an example of the kinds of courses that we cover off. Recognizing the diversity of students in our program, we offer a foundations course that helps to get everybody on the same page, starts to do a deeper dive into the topic that I discussed about disasters as not being natural phenomena. And so then we have a lot of other courses that build on that and help provide the knowledge necessary to work in those 5 functional areas: prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So I will leave it with that, and we'll just ask that wherever you are from in the world, maybe if in the chat box you could say, what is the hazard you're most concerned about where you live today? And I will pass it on to Dr. Kenneth Christie from the Human Security and Peacebuilding Program.
Thank you, Jean, and welcome to everyone that's joining us from all different parts of the world and parts of Canada. And a big thank you to Selena Cunard for putting this together. Works really well, and I think that it's a great opportunity to talk about our programs. So my name's Ken Christie. I'm a professor in the School of Humanitarian Studies. I'm also the program head for Human Security and Peacebuilding, and I've been the program head for over 10 years now. So I would say I know the program fairly well. But what we do in this 2-year program is that we respond to the increasing demand for leadership in humanitarian assistance, in social reconstruction, in conflict management and peace building in international contexts. I would say we also do this, of course, in domestic contexts. A lot of people say, well, this program looks like it's designed for international students and people who want to travel abroad and work abroad. And in part it is. But of course, human security as a theory and a practice, and peace building as theory and practice, does not end just simply with sorry, that's the emergency alarm for BC going on. So we're getting disaster and emergency management all in one here. Sorry about that. And so we're also looking at peace building and human security in domestic contexts. And there's enormous problems, societal problems, economic problems, political problems, and social problems within Canada, of course, that take into account human security and peace building. But when we view peace building, we're looking at it as a very broad concept which emphasizes social transformation, integrating short-term development initiatives into long-term sustainable peace processes. And we really concentrate a lot of our effort on this and a lot of work on this, which we find that the students who come into their program, many of them do end up going overseas and have exciting careers. We have students in different parts of Africa, for instance. We have students all over Asia. We have students in Latin America who are doing incredible work in development. Some of them are diplomats. Some of them are working for the United Nations. Some of them are working for large NGOs that respond to social reconstruction. And of course, many of the people who teach for us are also within those fields. For instance, Dr. Lauren Oates, who works for an organization called Canadian Women for Afghan Women. And what she's doing, for instance, in Afghanistan is helping create literacy programs for girls and young women, and really transforming people's lives within this really difficult conflict situation. And we have many, many more examples. We have many examples of people who have gone on to have fantastic careers within the United Nations, within these large-scale development programs everywhere and in government. And of course, I think I just saw a question there about is it suitable for people without the experience? Well, the way to get experience is to come into a program like this and respond to this. Selena, do you think you could show the next slide? Thanks. So here again, as Jean was saying, here are some sample topics, but really they're the names of courses within human security and peace building. We have foundations of human security and peace building, which introduces students, and also we of course we will be having practitioners who want to get their degree. We have a course on social policy issues, social and economic insecurity. We have the politics of governance and human security. We have a course on international law and global institutions. We have conflict in the post-war Cold War era also. But these are just a few of the courses we have. And within these courses, we deal with the subject really in an interdisciplinary way. So although my background, for instance, as a scholar, as a professor is in political science, we look at aspects of political science, history, sociology, anthropology, all sorts of areas which interconnect and form to provide us with a sort of greater idea and a greater sort of framework of how we can look at these things. So we have amazing lectures, we have amazing professors who come in and teach these courses, and generally they straddle the boundaries between the scholarship and practitioners. So that's one of the great things. Of course, also within the program, we also offer a diploma. So we have a 1-year diploma as well as a 2-year master's program. But within the master's program, we allow 3 different streams. One is that you can take all courses, simply course related. Another is that you can take a thesis, for example, or you can construct a thesis if you want to go on and maybe do something more in higher education. And the other area that you can work in is we can offer you an internship where you can actually go out in the real world and develop your skills. So what we do basically is try to develop these incredible skills which you'll need to provide people, vulnerable people with human security, transform societies, and create this kind of humanitarian world. So I think that's about it from me. It's probably gone over my time, but thank you.
And now I think it's my turn. I am Dr. Marnie Jull. I'm just about to come up on your screen there. And I'm the associate professor and the program head for the conflict analysis and management program at Royal Roads. So most of us have experienced conflict in our daily lives as well as in the systems in which we work. So I just invite you to put into the chat, what is it that comes to mind for you when you think about conflict? And I know that many of you already put in the poll that you are interested in thinking more about conflict. But considering that we have people who are joining us from Sri Lanka, Nigeria, India, British Columbia, and Canada, we've all had experiences both interpersonally as well as organizationally and within our culture community or in our country that deal with conflict. So I'm really interested in what might come up in the chat as you sort of think about what might be conflict for you, what comes to mind for you. One of the things that emerges when anytime we start talking about conflict is that the theories that we have about conflict really influence how we act and engage within them. And for anyone who's interested in humanitarian action, whether it's through human security or through disaster and emergency management or through justice studies, it's very clear that if we want to do good in the world, we need to do it with other people and through organizations or some kind of cooperation with others. And that can be actually quite challenging to do. So the master's and the diploma in conflict analysis and management help to develop both the analysis and the skills to be using ourselves within systems to effect change more effectively. So we actually use conflict as a point of leverage to be able to make the kind of changes that that the conflict show need to be addressed. So we don't talk as much about conflict resolution anymore because sometimes conflict needs to be engaged with. There's conscientious conflict through which significant social change takes place. What we aim for is conflict that is less rash and less destructive and is more conscientious and or engaged with in a way that moves to a system towards more flourishing rather than more truncation or one that negates human dignity. So in the conflict analysis and management program, we really work on building conflict capacity. So that starts with ourselves within what our own conflict capacity is, what are the skills and competences we need intrapersonally within ourselves, interpersonally, as well as systemically to be able to influence change towards a more positive trajectory. The kinds of people who come to the conflict analysis and management program are people who can see that there is something about conflict that reveals something important to the people involved or to the systems or organizations that are involved. They see that they want to make some kind of difference through conflict, and so they want to upgrade their skills or certification to be able to be more effective in their chosen field. And the kinds of fields that come into the conflict analysis and management program are very different and diverse. There's business analysts, there's police officers in corrections, there's people in the education field as teachers or principals.
Esa es
There's
mi tarea
leader-
y a mí es una clase.
Hey, Obed.
there's-
Ay, no, no.
there are leaders in the not-for-profit sector. There are people who have just come out of university and have a background in political science. And then there's people who have been nearing retirement and want to learn more about conflict in a third career, for example. So there's a wide variety of people who come with this sense of there's something important about conflict, want to develop their skills and analysis. And then they leave the program with a much deeper sense of how to use conflict for change, what are their particular skill set that they can become more effective in influencing change, and how to work more effectively with others to do that. One of the great gifts about the School of Humanitarian Studies is that each student has an opportunity to dive very deeply into their own field through a thesis, as Ken was mentioning, or an internship. So if you're interested in disaster and emergency management, you can also do an internship or in conflict analysis and management. But there's also electives that people who are doing a course-based track can take. So that means that you can also take courses that are related to these other fields, because there is something about this School of Humanitarian Studies that really seeks to, through justice, dignity, well-being, protect individuals and communities towards a better future. So there's deep connections amongst our different programs with different skills and perspectives that help to advance that. So, so I'll just go on to the next slide. And thank you for those who have put in the chat around friction, and one of the things that you'll see very quickly, there's a relational complexities among different parties. It is endless. And so one of the things that you'll also notice about Royal Roads is that we are a dynamic learning organization that engages students. It's not a passive education where you are constantly challenged to bring your own experience and your own cases and your own wisdom and knowledge that we help to develop. There's a strong commitment to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada and a recognition of the global Indigenous peoples, through which we are also, as an organization, working to advance the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission within Canada. So with that very broad commitment to sustainability and social justice, each of our programs really works to design those facets into our programs. So as an example, with the conflict analysis and management program, there's the foundation on figuring out what is conflict and who am I within it. There's specific professional skills. So you work on the engagement with conflict through mediation or negotiation skills, through curious questions and those interpersonal skills. There's a reflective practice about who are you within a system. We examine legal frameworks within the Canadian context, as well as process design about what kinds of processes of multi-stakeholder or multi-party through to conflict coaching or arbitration can be used to address conflict more productively. So there's a wide variety of conflicts we engage with, a wide variety of skills, and this incredible richness of backgrounds that contribute to a very dynamic and interesting learning environment within the conflict analysis and management program and within all the programs here in the School of Humanitarian Studies. And with that, I get to pass it over to my colleague, Dr. Kathleen Mannion.
Thank you so much, Marty. Fantastic to be here. And my name is Kathleen Mannion. I am a associate professor in this school with this wonderful group of colleagues with such a rich depth and breadth of subject matters. And that really plays out, I think, within the Justice Studies program as well. And it is such a privilege to be able to teach in this program because, like some of my colleagues, some of the concepts that we play with in this program are really fundamental to human flourishing. So in this program, we're focused on justice and what it means to live a good life, to explore concepts of justice, injustice, equality, inequality, to really unpack what it means to have a dignified life and to treat people with dignity. So with some of those more philosophical questions at the heart of this program, we start the program. We focus a lot on self-reflection and understanding where we're coming from, how we understand and navigate the world. But then we also look externally to what are the social structures we've actually created as societies to hold ourselves accountable for a just world. So we delve into law. So having looked at philosophy, we look at some of the legal structures, particularly within Canada, but more globally as well. And from that, we also start to really explore and understand how we navigate relationships together, how we communicate, how we can improve our interpersonal communication, how we work across cultures, how we navigate conflict, and how we can really improve or increase our human services skills. So the more tangible topics drawn really from social work to support the work that we do. And undergirding all of that is also a real focus on social sciences and pulling from a number of different social sciences to really understand how we support moving through a just world. We really focus in this program on action-oriented work. We focus on solutions and really exploring the context in which everyone is in across the classes. One of the things I really like about the Justice Studies program is it draws in such a breadth of different students, and it is in that mix of the different students and the different disciplines that they're coming from that we can really start to unpack some complex social issues. So it's a real privilege to work in that. This is a point of departure from some of the other programs that we've talked about and will talk about because this is a bachelor's degree. And it's also useful to note that this is a finishing degree. So you will end this with a 4-year degree, but it is only years 3 and 4. So it assumes you either come in with the work skills equivalent to years 1 and 2, or you've actually gone to college and have years 1 and 2 from another post-secondary institution. I'm conscious of time, so I'm trying to go a little bit quicker. Selena, do you want to move on to the next slide for me? Thank you. So again, like others here, we're just looking at some of the courses we're focused on here. We cover a range of different topics. So because this is an undergraduate degree, there's quite a few more courses. There are 20 courses in the program, but we cover topics looking at criminal justice, but other aspects of justice. We look at public policy. We compare and contrast global legal approaches and look at international law. We focus on some of those more soft skills, human service skills or social work skills, and conflict analysis and management as well. And really, given the context in which Royal Roads is situated within the Canadian context, we really also bring in Indigenous justice perspectives to really challenge our thinking from wherever we're coming from, to really give more depth and breadth to the concept of justice studies. Wow, Wendy, that quickly. It's also me coming up with the next program, which is something I'm also very, very pleased to be part of. This is a brand new program we're launching in the fall, and it's a grad certificate, so a little bit different than other programs again, because this is only three courses. It is focused on our knowledge and expertise working in international development, but also working with First Nations within Canada. So we've combined that to try and explore what it would be like to move from some of the discourse around child protection to something that's more holistic, that looks at well-being of children. And through this grad certificate, we're supporting conversations to do that. And the next slide, Selena. This is quite interesting because it is only 3 courses. Here we have the entire program listed here. So we have, we're starting with foundations to really unpack some of the theory behind understanding of child protection and child well-being, and use that to undergird the program. In the second course, we move into practice, and we really start to look at how you understand and assess practice, how you turn theory into practice. And in that final course, we're really getting our hands dirty and looking at some of the tools and approaches for change, how you work with children and young people to affect change in a given community, how you explore monitoring and evaluation within a given context, again, to affect change, and how you move to policy change or policy implementation. And whew, that was my program. And with that, I am turning it over to my colleague, Dr. Michael Young, who's looking at the MA in Justice.
Thank you, everyone, leading up to this. This was very informative, and thank you for your time and effort into that. You can see I've got my dreamscape in the background. If no one has mentioned the COVID word yet, and that we are living in this around the world, so we are quite conscious of its effect on people. So what is Master of Arts in Justice Studies all about? Well, we have taken a transdisciplinary approach to studies of complex social problems. What does that mean? Well, quite a few years ago now, there was a term that emerged talking about wicked problems, and wicked problems being those problems that we don't ever seem to really get a very good grip on, and when we do, it slips away in terms of being solvable or solved, as the case may be. So some of those wicked problems are with us all the time. Some of them come and go. It depends on the moment in history. But I want to take a minute now, if I could ask our viewers, what problems does your community deal with, or try to deal with, that are wicked or seem to be insolvable? What kind of complex problems are you struggling with? And we'll come back to that in a minute. So the MA in Justice Studies emerged from a review of a lot of the research and literature on and practices on these complex problems. And it is a very new degree. It's 3 years old. And from what we've seen so far, it's been quite popular. The people we get into the program really come from a broad variety of backgrounds, very much like Marnie Chol was talking about. We have police, we have corrections officers, we have people in social work, we have people working in homeless shelters, we have people working in the environment all over the map. And so we ask them, what is it that brings you to the program? And I have some notes here that I've written down, so my head's going to be pointing up towards my other screen for a moment. But basically what people have is a motivation to make a difference, to contribute, to take on the challenges that are facing us, and a pursuit of justice. And what do we mean by justice? Well, I'll come to that in a moment. But what do they get when they're through the degree? What are their assumptions? What are their hopes? What are their dreams? Well, what they would like to be, most of them, is to be a reflective practitioner who can build on creating solutions with a strong theoretical base and skills for applying justice. And again, we go back to, what do we mean by justice? Well, our MA in Justice is not a criminal justice program. It's not explicitly a social justice program. It does bring those together. And from that, I will go just to look at the chat to see some of the issues that people brought up. Addiction and homelessness, dehumanization, intolerance, social inequality, homeless persons with concurrent disorders, mental health, food security. Yeah, these are great, great examples. So what's a transdisciplinary perspective? Well, if you think about the development of the university, we generally started with what we call a discipline: geography, psychology, sociology. Those are disciplines. We moved into this next level on the spectrum called multidisciplinary. What happens when you get more than one discipline working on a problem? Well, there's a couple of ways of approaching it. So one discipline may take one approach, one may take another. So use homelessness, for example, homelessness. Some people say, well, there's maybe a psychological issue that could be dealt with homeless people, where the other sociological perspective might say, well, there might be some social structures blocking the person's ability to participate. We then moved into what we call interdisciplinary, when we have studies being developed that involve disciplines from working together. So we have these groups working together to bring about some solutions. The problem is they don't always bring about a solution that will be workable because they don't necessarily engage together. So now we've emerged at what we'll call a transdisciplinary perspective. And the transdisciplinary models are very much an approach that involves a team. And that team spirit lives on in our programs here at university, and it certainly is part of our program in the EMA Justice Studies program. And I'll give you some examples of some of the projects that have been worked on and are being worked on at the moment. And some of those reflect what have been mentioned in the chat box. And so could we change slides, please? Right, so and these are some course topics. So foundations in transdisciplinary justice. And I have no idea how much time I have left, but I'll keep talking until somebody gives me a sign. So when we look at a transdisciplinary problem, we'll look at a conceptual language that gets developed to deal with the problem amongst the disciplines. And so we're moving beyond what a discipline may bring to a problem and moving towards something that be more solution focused. And so here's some examples from students in terms of what their interests are coming into the program. Youth homelessness, mental illness, gangs, colonization, autism, sex trafficking, refugees, safe injection facilities, social justice and the LGBTQ community, obesity, recidivism, First Nations and restorative justice, rural poverty, justice in prisons, and the list goes on. And you'll see some of our topics here, current issues and justice. Really, that's what I'm speaking to. Indigeneity and justice. What does it mean to be an Indigenous person? What does it mean to be Indigenous in Canada? What does it mean to be Indigenous in other communities around the world? What kind of problems need to be dealt with in order to tackle what has come to be known as the problems associated with colonialization? How do we do that? Well, we've started processes to decolonize education. And what does that mean? Well, we're at the very beginning of this story, and so we have a lot of investigation to do, but we have a lot of challenges, but we have a lot of hope as well, and we have a lot of eager people from many different perspectives working together on this. And so that brings me to a little bit of discussion on our instructors and the people who teach with us. For me, I am a criminologist, and so I come to this area kind of versed in multidisciplinary perspectives as it is, but certainly the transdisciplinary is a new approach for all of us. And our program is the only program of its kind in Canada that we're aware of, and could be the only one of its kind in North America, as far as I know. The sort of background for the people who come to teach for us can be anywhere from those working in the in the service communities, I guess we could say, in terms of the criminal justice system, or people working in social work, or people working as true academics. It really depends on the course and the approach that we want to have taken in that course. But suffice to say, in a very short last couple of words, the approach we take is holistic in this program, because we realize that context is everything. And if we look at a problem like homelessness and concurrent disorders, as was mentioned by somebody in the chat, that problem is much bigger than even just systemic issues that people face in their everyday lives. Much bigger than what they bring in terms of personal baggage or background, whatever you would like to call it, in terms of their life, their lot in life. And that's what we hope to do, and really are starting to do from a holistic perspective, is to develop policies and programs and approaches, responses that deal with those wicked, nasty problems. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Michael, and all of the program heads who spoke in depth about what your programs are all about and what folks can expect to engage in within the courses. So we have come right to the end of our time today. So unfortunately, we don't have time for too many questions, but that said, most of the questions that were asked have actually been answered in our chat box. So I encourage folks in the break between now and our next session, take a cruise through the chat box. There has been some great information shared about all of the programs we talked about today. This slide is a quick flash for those who are interested in learning about when our next intakes for these programs are. The slide actually serves a bit of a dual purpose. It is your cheat sheet for the surprise giveaway that we have to conclude our session today. So take a cruise over this slide and then get your hands on your keyboard, because the first person who pops the right answer into the chat box will be the winner of our giveaway. So we have one Bachelor of Arts program in the School of Humanitarian Studies. What does it focus on? Feel free to pop your answers into the chat box now. Oh, amazing. Oh, that was so fast. Amber, you squeaked past the finish line and you have won our giveaway. So once again, a big thank you to you all and have a great rest of your day. Bye.